All right, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. Election day is upon us, at least this off-year election day. But I want to look ahead also to midterms, and nobody better to talk to about that stuff than friend of the show, Bruce Mehlman. Let's start with Tuesday, right? We've got three really marquee races: New York City, New Jersey, and Virginia. And let's start in New York City. Zohran Mamdani is the Democratic nominee. He's going up against Andrew Cuomo, running as an independent. And is it Sliwa? How would I say that? Sliwa? How do I pronounce the Republican's name? Do we know?
It's written Sliwa, but I've not followed him closely enough to have it as hard a pronunciation, mostly because we both know he's not the next mayor of New York City.
No. And he was the, I guess, founder of the Guardian Angels, which was a big deal in New York City, maybe like in the 80s, 70s, 80s. Am I correct? We assume that Mamdani will win, or is there a chance that Cuomo pulls this one off?
Well, there's a chance. The polling ostensibly has tightened. Now, whether that's the media writing the story that the polling has tightened, or whether that's some commentators suggesting the media can tighten. Obviously, Cuomo is a famous name. His dad, Mario Cuomo, he was the governor. So it's I don't see Sliwa dropping out, but there's a non-zero possibility that some number of voters, they don't want to defund the police, something that Mamdani used to advocate. I think he is, like Vice President Harris, I think he has adjusted some of his views from years past. But he's been leading in all the polls. He's been leading in double digits. The Cuomo momentum was minus 20 down to like minus 10, which is momentum. But that's double digits down is still double digits down.
I don't know if you saw this. I haven't had a chance to independently verify this, but apparently Bill Kristol said something about how he would vote for Mamdani if he were in New York. What do you make of that? Surprising, right? I mean, this is a Democratic Socialist, but he's seems to be likable, very charismatic, but obviously very different politically than Bill Kristol that we
might say
years ago.
You're right. Although a few thoughts on that. First, we're in an age, my Substack's name, Age of Disruption, where we're scrambling up political alliances and political takes. And while there's 0.0% chance Bill Kristol is ever going to be a Democratic Socialist, I didn't see Kristol's specific comments. But if Kristol's comment were Andrew Cuomo had a chance to lead, he had to resign, like that's a pretty reasonable take. I think one of the reasons Mamdani is going to win is because the alternatives were Adams, the sitting mayor, very unpopular, and Cuomo, who resigned the governorship in disgrace. It's the idea that we're shocked that somebody can beat those two guys feels to me, we need to get better at not being shocked. Maybe that's motivating Kristol. We also know Kristol has frequently disagreed with President Trump. Maybe he sees this as an opportunity for President Trump, a President Trump antagonist that perhaps gets some mileage. Or conversely, maybe he sees the arrival in a position of legitimate power, Gracie Mansion, of a Democratic Socialist will help bring some, if not Reagan restoration, at least some restoration of an understanding that there's also a ideological conservative reason to reject some of these. So Kristol could be motivated by a whole lot of stuff. Maybe he was just pointing out that the guy is young. He is super smooth. He's really good on TikTok. And he may have merely been admiring in the same way you and I might admire AOC, not somebody we agree with on a lot of policy, but she's an incredibly talented politician in the digital age. So's Mamdani.
For sure. So if Mamdani does go on to win, as we suspect he will, it could be interesting, man. I mean, Trump is threatening to pull funding. He's threatening to send in the troops. I mean, clearly Republicans will try to make him like the face of the Democratic Party, right? They're going to try to say, it's just like Republicans used to do to Ted Kennedy or Nancy Pelosi or Hillary Clinton. Mamdani becomes, they will try to say, if you're running in Ohio, if you're Sherrod Brown, you're just like the socialist in New York. Does that work, or is that a stretch? What do you think?
You're right. A lot of folks are licking their chops thinking, a great foil is arriving. A lot probably depends on how Mamdani chooses to approach stuff and govern. I believe there are lots of limits on what a mayor of New York City can actually do, particularly in areas like taxes. They need a lot of support, often from Albany, that he's not going to necessarily get. And so exactly how transformational he can be remains to be seen. Maybe he'll pick the low-hanging fruit. He'll pick a few things that he can do well. He'll have message discipline, and he'll be a good rhetorical foil in the way the new and improved Governor Gavin Newsom seems to be reinventing himself as a Trumpian rhetorical foil. So I think the jury is out. You tend to feel like it's a stretch to say the reason you need to vote for for Houston in Ohio is because Mamdani is the mayor of New York and he's coming for, New Jersey? I mean, it feels like tougher to point to a mayor, even of the Big Apple, and suggest that this is now entirely what the Democrats are. Some of this also, though, is if you're Team Trump, who's your foil right now? Pelosi's not the speaker anymore. Jeffries is pretty hard to lay a glove on. Schumer is so inside baseball. He's just not a national guy to really target and go after in the way a Pelosi was, or in the way others have been, and so Hillary might have been. So they'll be reaching for a foil, because in the midterms, if it's a referendum on the sitting president's party is going to lose seats unless the sitting president's approval is over 60, and it's just hard to conceive of a world where President Trump, however much success he has, ends up with approval over 60%.
Indeed. All right, so speaking of New Jersey, let's go across the Hudson. So we've got former state rep Jack Ciattarelli, who is his third time, I think, running for governor of New Jersey. Last time he came really close in 2021, so surprised a lot of people. And he's actually, I think, polling better this time around. He's running against Mikie Sherrill, who is quite an impressive resume, but currently a state rep in New Jersey, a congresswoman in New Jersey. She seems to be very competent, but has run kind of a boring, centrist campaign. And she's up in the polls, but it seems to be pretty darn close. I guess the problem Ciattarelli has is Donald Trump. I mean, not only is Trump maybe a little bit of baggage in a state like New Jersey that's overwhelmingly Democratic, but Trump blocked some funding or something for this bridge that can't be great for commuters.
Always a bridge in New Jersey.
The bridge and tunnel, folks. But what do you think happens? Does Ciattarelli find a way to steal this one, figuratively speaking?
Yeah, careful with that phrase. Look, Ciattarelli's run a really good race, and Sherrill has not run a really good race. So potential outcome number one is just the candidate who put the smarter race on pulls it out. Possibility number two is that the state, if you look at the last presidential, if you look at the last couple of races, this may be a place where you're seeing the sort of the reinvention of the Republican Party under Donald Trump to be more of a populist party, less of a educated elitist party. And if Ciattarelli wins, I do think a lot of folks are going to want to, me too, and you too, dive into the data to try to figure out, is this demonstration that the Democratic Party took for granted blue-collar voters of color, presuming that they are automatics. And in reality, blue-collar voters of color don't like where the Democrats have aligned as sort of the pronoun party on culture war issues. And so that could be, if Ciattarelli wins, it could be because he ran a better race. It could be because the Democratic blue advantage in a state like New Jersey is altering. It doesn't feel, with only a few days to go, that it will be the successes of President Trump outside the country or economically that are the positive. They will certainly, if Sherrill wins, be cited by Democrats as proof that the midterms are going to be a wave, fund them and invest in them and bet on them, and that they'll claim that the president's unpopular and he's failing to address cost of living issues. It's possible, but as you point out, it's also a Virginia even more so, but it's a non-zero possibility that New Jersey and particularly Virginia go against the party that holds the White House, because we're in the age of pissed off voters who want to send a signal to whoever is in charge. 11 of the last 13 federal elections have been change elections. That's the mindset of the voters. They want change. Throw the bums out and bring in new bums. And So right now, the Republicans are perceived more as the incumbent party, particularly in an open race like the governorship.
Look, my thinking is Sherrill ought to win this race. So, like, if she wins, it's not like, hey, we've got momentum. It's like, no, that's what you're supposed to do.
Yep.
Like, if you can't win in New Jersey in 2025, then when can you win?
Right. And
Right?
that's the big signal is if somebody asked me a week ago when I was doing Q&A, and my answer is, like, what are you looking for? And I said, I'm looking for surprises. Exactly what you just said. If stuff doesn't go the way the default suggests it should, there's a lot more of a lesson in that than, you wake up and the sky is blue.
So down I-95, the Commonwealth of Virginia, you've got former Rep. Abigail Spanberger running against Lieutenant Governor Winsome Earle-Sears. I think everyone expects Spanberger to run away with this when she's up by double digits. But are you seeing anything that might make this an upset?
Well,
and by the way, let me just say, what I just said in New Jersey is probably even more true in Virginia in the sense of, like, their history is they always, whoever wins the White House the next year, the opposite party wins. And it goes both ways. If a Democrat wins the White House, they'll put a Republican in the governor's mansion and vice versa. So history, not only polling, but history certainly suggests it ought to be an Abigail Spanberger year.
Agreed. The big lesson would be if Sears somehow pulls it out, then it's like, holy cow, something significant has just happened for the historical reasons. Number one, you're right. Number two, Virginia's a state with a lot of federal employees who live in Northern Virginia who are probably now either working without pay or furloughed and worried that the administration is going to cut their jobs. So you figure Northern Virginia voters are going to be motivated and figuratively and literally blue. So that isn't good news for Sears. I'd also argue Spanberger's been a better candidate, just looking kind of at the athleticism of the races run. Now, you never know. Youngkin's a very talented guy. I mean, Virginia's a one and done governorship, so it's not like he's built a machine per se, but he's competent and well regarded. And so they've lost some stuff on his tenure too. So I'm not here to tell you, he's got it all wired. The big curveball, I think, and is the Attorney General Democratic nominees just quite insane text comments about hoping that his opponents, children die in their mother's arms. Just some crazy stuff that is
so
truly...
This is Jay Jones, the Democratic nominee for Attorney General, and he's running against Jason Miyares, who's the incumbent Republican Attorney General. And Jones sent a text, and it was about a Republican. I think it was the then Speaker of the House in the Virginia State House, I think. But that roiled this race. It actually was used. Sears attempted to use it in the debate against Spanberger. It doesn't appear that has shifted the gubernatorial race, but it did shift the AG race. In fact, it's a jump ball as far as I can tell. This is the race. So maybe I'll put you on the spot with this one. Who wins the Attorney General race in Virginia?
I mean, if you can have a candidate who just texted somebody about wishing death of children in their mother's arms, and you pick that guy to be your chief law enforcement officer, your Attorney General, boy, have we gotten hyper partisan. Now that said,
Bruce, I think if I'm betting, I think I'm betting Jones. But it's like a 50-50 in the polls, right? I think I'm betting Jones if I have to.
It's super tight. And look, we're in an age where we can both name lots of candidates at all levels who have said stuff that just in political growing up would have been unacceptable. And even President Trump. I mean, John McCain's not a hero. I'm like, well, he's done. And President Trump has proven me wrong and probably proven me the kind of the prudish, I think of the other side not as the enemy, as the loyal opposition.
You're not alone, Bruce.
I'm a dinosaur, but it seems to me the commentary from the Democratic nominee for Attorney General should be fatal, but it's a jump ball, and we'll see. It won't be for lack of being aware of them, because the Republican side has done everything they could. I thought that was the one punch landed, or at least the best punch landed by Sears in the debate, was, as Spanberger just rigidly stares ahead, not wanting to take the bait as she's being asked about those truly awful comments. And Spanberger has said they were awful comments, and the nominee has Jones has apologized, but again, I'm a believer in forgiveness, but I'm also a believer in punishment, and I want to punish a candidate who says something like that by having them lose, and I'll forgive them as a human being and allow them to spend later years making up for what may have even just been terrible things to say. But I kind of feel like running for office, what you say is pretty much what you're selling.
Well, maybe later we'll get to the main U.S. Senate race and some stuff that's been said there. But let's linger here in Virginia for just a minute. I'm in the D.C. market just like you are, Bruce. And so when I'm watching Top or Shut or, the weather, the news, the sports, especially about 6 o'clock in the morning before I head over to Morning Joe, I get a lot of Virginia political commercials. And what has shocked me, what I don't understand, maybe you can explain this to me, or if you've seen the same thing. A lot of the Democratic ads, the biggest hit that when Republicans are attacking Sears or Meirelles, it's about abortion. And I'm like, this feels like 2024, and that didn't really work as well as they thought. They thought that was going to be the big silver bullet in 2024. Why is it that Democrats, of all the things, there's affordability, there's ICE, there's just tie them to Trump, there's a government shutdown that you might think would be impacting Virginia disproportionately, right? But abortion seems to be the number one issue. And is it just me? What do you make of that?
Well, I make that candidates follow recommendations from their pollsters who test all of the possible issues and decide what they think is most effective. I think you're right. I think a lot of the Dems in 24 thought the Dobbs decision was going to save them, and it just wasn't ripe in the 24 election. It's not what made people go one way or another. Cost of living did, immigration did. Because I'm a Maryland guy, because we do government relations, we don't do political campaigns, I've not spent a lot of time diving into the crosstabs to figure out whether swing voters are indeed motivatable on abortion. But if not, it's malpractice. So let's assume that they've got the data showing them that, there are basically, it would be suburban women and young women. And young women, you got to make sure turn out in an off year. And suburban women, you got to make sure don't get distracted by crime or other issues where Republicans often do better than Democrats. So that's my presumption. But like you, I'm looking forward to the autopsies after these things happen. My base case, like yours, is Mamdani wins in New York, because New York, the Democrat wins, and because they put up Cuomo and Adams. So, of course, he beat those guys. And then that Sherrill wins because you're supposed to win if you're a Democrat in New Jersey when the Republicans hold the White House particularly, and then in Virginia because you always win if you're the non-White House party in the governor's race, with one exception. So for all of those reasons, I align with you.
Well, we're both smart. Here's what I'm watching. Two races I'm watching that we've discussed. I think there's a chance Ciattarelli surprises everybody and wins that race. Right? I'm not betting on it. I think I bet on Sherrill, but I'm keeping an eye on the New Jersey gubernatorial race and then the AG race. That's just so tight, right? And Jones versus Meirelles in Virginia, the AG race, attorney general race. Those are the two races that, to me, as a it's sort of like on Sunday, you're like, well, the Cowboys are playing the Redskins. I want to watch, the Commanders. There's a couple games every week that you want to see, and I think this is those are the two races that I'd like to see.
Yeah, it's as we discussed, though, if the Dems lose the attorney general race in Virginia, that's simply because their quarterback crashed his car and couldn't play, and
Right.
And in New Jersey, I think there are more things that if Ciattarelli wins, there's a lot that we'll want to unpack. Is it a different electorate because populist waves are changing it? Who defected from the presumed Democratic coalition? Is it that Ciattarelli ran a much better race and therefore did a better job as turnout? There will be a lot to unpack there. I think with AG in Virginia, we'll know why it happened. For me, the better question is if Jones wins, what the hell? What do voters? How do voters explain it? Was it just they figure he had a bad day? I mean, it was multiple days.
And if he wins convincingly, like by three to 5 points, here's why I think Jones wins. It's number one, we've normalized this behavior and rhetoric, and people who were going to vote Democratic are like, Donald Trump says this much before breakfast. Why am I going to turn against my team? We're now tribalistic, right? And it's a Democrat year. Spanberger at the top of the ticket is going to destroy Sears. How many people are just going to go vote Democrat ticket this year? So I think that's why Jones ekes it out. But hey, it's tied in the polls, so I could totally be wrong. All right, let's move. Here's what's going to happen. The election's Tuesday. Wednesday, the midterms begin, right? The midterm races will begin next week. The minute after, the second we stop analyzing, the 2025 races, the 2026 midterms will begin. So I figure we can go ahead and preview that quickly, Bruce. So I saw this in your newsletter. The president's party loses seats in the midterms. It's happened in 18 of 20 midterms since World War II. So if that continued to be true, and I'm going to talk about why it may not, but if history repeats, then Democrats ought to have a good night.
That's the House, of course.
Yeah, and that's where we'll go. We're going to go with the House. So 3 data points. 1, generic ballot. Right now, Democrats are up by 2 or 3 points in the generic ballot, which sounds good, except I believe at this point in the 2018 cycle, they were up by like 8 points. So how much of a problem is that? Well, before we get to the gerrymandering, which we will turn to.
Look, you're right. There's a lot to unpack with the House. You start with, if anybody ever says to any of your listeners, bet on the outcome of midterms in the House of Representatives, you should always bet against the party that holds the White House, because it's 18 out of 20 since World War II. If you were able to say, well, give me one data point, the one you'd want is the presidential approval, because the only times the party holding the White House has avoided the midterm loss of seats were in 98 and 2002, when the presidential approval, respectively, were 66 and 63%. Whatever goes down, President Trump's not going to be in the 60% unless, God forbid, we're at war at that point. You assume that there'll be some amount of drag. Then you look at, okay, well, what's the current margin? And the answer is net 3 flips the House. This is the smallest margin in the House since 1931. So it's not like it takes this is not a 50-foot putt on an undulating green. This is not quite a tap in, but you start with, it's a pretty straightforward looking putt. Then you say, okay, but Republicans are going to have a lot of money. Republicans are going to have, it's a very narrow battlefield. Barack Obama lost 60 in 2010, but that's because Dem waves had happened back to back in 06 and 08. They were sitting in a bunch of Republican seats. So it was only a matter of time. By contrast, there are only 3 Republicans in districts that had voted for Kamala Harris, compared to 13 Democrats in districts that had voted for Donald Trump in 2024. So it's a small battlefield, and one that's a little bit skewed towards the Republicans, which leads to your redistricting observation that maybe instead of net 3, they can make it net 15. And it becomes a more survivable possibility.
So right now, this started with Texas. Trump said, give me 5 seats. They're doing it. California is probably going to respond. On Tuesday, Prop 2, I think it is, whatever. There's a ballot initiative that would
Prop
give...
50 in California.
Prop 50, that would give Gavin Newsom and Democrats the ability to do their own gerrymandering. They're going to get 5 seats, probably. So it becomes a wash with Texas and California, but watch out, coming off the rail is now Indiana is going to get in the game, Florida possibly, Virginia actually may, for Democrats, get maybe, I think, 3 seats. So how does it shake before we are going to get to the whole Civil Rights Act Section 2 or whatever, but how does just this straight up gerrymandering without the Supreme Court intervention, how does it shake out net wise? How many, I assume there's more Republican seats to steal, and I will use that word this time. There's more Republican seats to get from gerrymandering than there are Democrat seats, right?
So you and I both read people like Dave Wasserman, the people who really spend a lot of time trying to analyze and think about all this stuff. And the sense is to be able to pull this off mid-decade, you need to have a state entirely controlled by one party. There are more states entirely controlled by the Republicans, by the Democrats. You then need to kind of have money left on the table. And by that, I mean, Republicans could have done the map that they just did in Texas. They could have done it in 2021, They didn't want to because some number of the guys like seats that are Republican plus 25. They don't have to work very hard.
Yeah.
To
If I'm a Republican congressman, I don't want a race that I'm only winning by 8.
Yeah, this is the tragedy of the commons. The party would like to maximize the number of seats the party wins. Any individual member of the party would like to make their reelection as secure as possible. You want to keep representing the same people. You don't want somebody to say, we've drawn new lines, your district's plus 8, but only 20% of them ever voted for you before, because one of the main assets an incumbent has is name recognition. And if you're not the sitting member, then it's like you're a first-time candidate. It could be a lot harder. So first, there are more Republican opportunities to redraw districts and pick up seats, but it also theoretically could lead to a year where a lot of incumbents are running less like incumbents and running in districts that are less familiar with them and their name ID. The gurus seem to suggest that it's greater likelihood Republicans are net positive, but it's not, even a maximalist outcome doesn't guarantee the midterms, but it moves you from, that 5-foot tap in, although anybody who's played with me knows I miss 5 foots all the time. So a 1-foot tap in to a tougher putt for the Dems, because even if they pick up seats, if they've got to pick up 15 net, that's a lot harder than picking up 3 net.
And then, as I alluded to, there is this possibility. So the Supreme Court just heard an argument that could potentially overturn part of the Civil Rights Act of 1965 that effectively required the drawing of majority-minority districts. Did I say that right?
It's the Voting Rights Act, but otherwise you got it.
Sorry. Good catch.
Law school,
and so
man.
Effectively what this means is that by law, the interpretation has been that you had to have in southern states some districts that are African American members of Congress, usually Democrats, always Democrats, I think, have gotten elected in. And this could go away pretty much, right? So I guess I've got 2 possible questions for you. Number one, if the court does in fact strike this down, would it go into effect by 2026, or is this a 2028 problem for Democrats?
Yeah, the things that I've read suggested first, the court does seem inclined to get rid of it for the same reason they got rid of affirmative action. The court has concluded that there shouldn't be laws that intentionally use race either against minority Americans or in theory to overcome past wrongs. That's part of the Voting Rights Section 2 idea. Was African Americans are 10% of the population, but not even close to 10% of the elected officials, elect members of Congress. So let's try to rectify that in the same way admissions had gotten there. But you saw how they feel about, they're now fully saying colorblind is colorblind. And so assuming that they go that way, you do throw out Section 2. I think the theoretical possibility of what the future Southern districts might look like runs into the timing reality of, so say the case is in December, we got primaries coming. Like I'm not sure. I haven't seen a good analysis of exactly how many states would even have the time to redraw a district.
And they normally announce the decision. So the decision would be handed down usually in June.
Right. They might decide this. So it could be in June. Theoretically, if the court really wanted to get here and really believe this, is sort of like they're going to do with the IEEPA tariffs, if they thought we need to get this decided sooner, usually they wait till June because they're about to end the term and then they're going to hit the road and not have to necessarily have people picketing outside the Supreme Court. But my presumption is it's much more 2028 and 2032 impactful than it's something that gives states the time to redraw districts and to post them and to then deal with the lawsuits that will come for other aspects of it. It feels tough. But there have been some civil rights groups that have suggested that, in a maximalist, most organized Republican effort, and you think the White House will encourage such an effort, they, that they see up to a net 15 to 17 at risk. In the South, the New York Times, I included that the side-by-side maps. I mean, the New York Times map, or it may be one that they just published, shows a red with blue pockets map to an overwhelmingly red map with only Atlanta and Charlotte and just a few, unlosable seats for Team Blue.
Yeah, that was a Nate Cohn story in the Times. Really good piece, alarming piece if you're a Democrat. Bruce, I just have to say, I guess 2 points. One, you're starting to see like history may not repeat itself, right? The Democrats should win. This should be a Democrat year, 2026. But because of the gerrymandering, and especially if this were to be enacted promptly, they may not. But long term, regardless, long term, it really feels me Democrats are going to have a problem, right? So Democrats already have the problem where they're cloistered in certain states. Like they're wasting a lot of votes in California if they spread out to like Montana, Wyoming. But the distribution of Democratic votes is very inefficient. And because the founders set up this system that's not solely based on national population, is states and districts and congressional districts and all that, Democrats just have a structural disadvantage that I think is probably going to continue to get worse, not better.
You're right, and it's important that everybody understand this is not some malign, either Trumpian or other artifact. This is self-sorting. People who are more likely to vote for Democrats are also more likely to want to live in cities. And historically, we've drawn the districts of people in areas are in the district together. So a city would encompass one or maybe a couple of congressional seats. If your goal were we want to maximize advantage, you would end up, drawing sort of like a pie with the center of the city being the center of the pie, and you would carve it up to marry suburban and rural areas radiating out from the city with denser urban cores. But then you'd have people in the city divided into 8 different congressional districts. And historically, we're all in the same city. We have similar issues. We should be in the same district. So there is an inefficiency. It does hurt the Democrats. It hurts them in the House. It hurts them even more in the Senate. But these are not for reasons of somebody has schemed so much as, at this point, the Democrats are the party more likely of educated urban dwellers, and the Republicans are more likely the party of suburbanites and ex-urban types.
Well, since you said Senate, we'll turn to the Senate, and then I'll get you out of here. All right. So by my reading, there are right now Republicans have 51 Senate seats. Democrats have 46.
No, they start with 47 right now. So they need
because of Bernie? Is that what I'm missing?
Well, I know they need net 4. They've got 47. I mean, you're probably looking at something that doesn't count Bernie Sanders or that's not counting independents.
The independents.
King in Maine is the
Democrats.
Other independent, but they're Democrats for caucus purposes. So the Dems need to net 4. When you look at the combination of toss-up, likely, and lean and likely seats, there are 9 of them in that category. Dems need to get 8 of the 9 if they're going to net 4, because 4 of them are Dem defense and 5 of them are Dem on offense. So 8 out of 9 is hard. Of the 9 states that aren't considered safe by Sabato, by Cook, of the 9 that aren't safe, they need to win 8, and 6 of them are states that Trump won in the midterms. One of them.
So you're talking Texas.
Well, so Texas,
Ohio.
Although if they get Paxton as the Republican nominee, maybe. Good luck beating Susan Collins. They love her in Maine. She's authentic. Ironically, if the governor who Chuck Schumer hoped to get as the nominee runs, Susan Collins, who is 72 years old, is significantly younger than the 77-year-old mayor or governor Mills. So Dems were convinced they could beat Senator Collins, but she is as independent and state-minded as a Republican can possibly be. To me, the Democrats cannot win in the Senate absent stagflation. If the economy starts going south, if it's hard for young people to get jobs right now, but we're not seeing a lot of firing, so unemployment remains okay. But in an event where inflation is rising and growth is slowing, all bets come off. And it's those sort of economies, 2010 was one. The other thing, Matt, we didn't talk about that's important, particularly for the House, but also for the Senate, and you probably had people on your show talking about this, is who votes and who is in which coalition has changed enough that Democrats are now the high propensity voter coalition, Republicans are the lower propensity voter coalition. If every single person who hadn't voted in 2024 had voted, Trump wins by more than he won. Whether
Amazing.
Trump can rally lower propensity voters when he's not on the ballot for a midterm is structurally in Democrats' favor. And Democrats are hoping that, ironically, our whole lives, Democrats wanted high turnout. They said basically, if you can breathe, that should be good enough. That should count as a vote. And Republicans have wanted 58 forms of identification. Ironically, that makes it harder to vote, which makes lower propensity voters more turned off, which is worse for Republicans. Democrats, if all they cared about was trying to maximize their outcomes, they probably would be okay with things that make, a poll tax, things that makes it difficult to vote because their guys are more likely to be able to vote. It means in special elections, Dems outperform what they perform in a general if Trump's on the ballot. It means in midterms, they're probably going to outperform what they did. But the other thing that I'm watching really closely is net favorability. Trump right now is net -7. Republican leadership, net -12. Democrats, net -24. They've got to turn it around. It's why they've shut the government down and they're fighting over it, is they've got to show fight. Their base is frustrated with them. The Republican base is not frustrated with the Republican leadership, and they're definitely not frustrated with President Trump. So the Democrats have to figure out how to get their base more motivated. I think where you started with voter ID, what party do people say they're with? Dems right now remain in the wilderness that they've been in since Kamala Harris lost. And they haven't decided if they are the party of Bernie, AOC, and Mamdani, or if they're the party of Josh Shapiro and Andy Bashir and the new and improved Gavin Newsom. They haven't figured it out. And unless and until they have a theory of the case, here's who we are and here's what we stand for beyond we don't like Trump, that is an offsetting structural challenge. So they have the higher propensity voters who at the moment are less psyched about their own team.
All right, my friend, I think that is a good place to end. Although I could talk to you all day. I've got a lot more. I got papers. But I think that's a great briefing for the listeners and the viewers. You Substack, your Substack's great. And if you're into this stuff, you should be reading Bruce's Substack. How can people find you there, man?
Well, most importantly, it's free, which kind of makes it a little bit of a bummer every Sunday when I get the email notification, that matt.lewis@gmail has quit. And I'm like, it wasn't worth nothing to that guy. Boy, that's a body blow.
It's not me.
Not
I have not quit.
It's but Bruce, Mehlman, Substack. If you just put those 3 words in your browser, it will come up with my Substack. You don't need a credit card. It's free. It's a weird hobby. It explains why I'm not good at all of the sports that I'm supposed to be good at this point. It's like you, man. It's why I love listening to you. It's why I love reading you. It's what I just find really interesting. It's useful for my day job, but it absolutely destroys any hobby.
Awesome, man. Well, I'm glad you get up early. It goes out Sunday mornings. There's six chart Sunday. It's charts and images, and sign up, get it. Bruce Mehlman, man. I'm just trying to keep up with you. You know so much more about this than I do.
We both know that's
thanks.
Not true, but I appreciate your having me on, and keep up your great work, Matt.
All right, buddy. Thanks for coming on.
See you.